Hello, folks, and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, thank you very much for listening to our show. We talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if you want to listen to that on the reg, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple or Spotify. When you get there, rate, review, but you got to subscribe, because if you do subscribe, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. Speaking of Mondays, it is one right now at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and that means we are live on YouTube. Go over to the YouTube, A to Z Sports Tennessee Volunteers on YouTube. You'll find this show. You'll find the explainer videos with Lucas Panzika, tons of stuff. You got to subscribe there too, but make sure you hit that notification bell, because if you do, you'll be notified when we go live, just like this on Mondays, and you can be a part of the show. You can drop in, comment, hang out with us. It's always a great time. At Charlie_Burris, at ZachTMT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, and A to Z Sports.com for everything that Zach writes on the internet. Plenty to write about today, Zach, because we had a little bit of a shakeup on Tennessee's staff. Mike Eckler leaving for Nebraska, so a special teams coach vacancy. But will it be a vacancy for very long? Obviously, that's going to be the main subject of the show, at least the first part of the show. But what's up, Zach?
Yeah, I don't know if we can ever replace Mike Eckler's vertical leap with any coach, because that's insane. If you've ever seen the sideline photos of him jumping and celebrating, he is a good, 3 feet off the ground. It's pretty wild, because he's in his 50s, I'm sure, but clearly some athleticism there that will be tough to replace.
Who will be the hype man now? I mean, that really is the question, because he was the sort of, what's the right word, effervescent guy that was just always the energy man on the sidelines, and he's out there. He headbutted a player one time, was bleeding from his nose. He's had some pretty funny moments. Everybody kept bringing up his, what was it, a fart in a skillet comment that he made. I mean, he was a real character, and he's moving on from Tennessee. And that's going to be the first thing that we talk about tonight. But also, I mean, this was going to be the main thing we were going to talk about, and it got pushed to number 2. Tennessee goes out on the basketball court, and in a game where I thought Tennessee could win. I definitely thought Tennessee at home against Florida, even 2 men short, could beat Florida if they really played well. But they go out and without 2 of their top guys, beat the brakes off of number 5 Florida. We're going to talk about that too. And then should we really start the podcast off with this though, Zach? Luka Doncic in the blockbuster trade of all blockbuster trades, perhaps. I don't want to be too opinionated, because I'm not, a massive NBA guy. I'm a Grizzlies fan, but probably one of the more stupid trades I've ever seen in the history of pro sports. Luka Doncic gets shipped off to the Lakers, and supposedly the Vol angle here that maybe we should bring up. Supposedly Dalton Connect was going to be a part of that trade originally, and then it got shuffled around and changed. But that was definitely something everybody's been talking about for about 2 days now.
Yeah, that's one of the wildest trades you've seen in you see some of those in baseball from time to time because of the contracts and free agency. Some of these guys get traded right before they lose team control. But to see a guy in his prime that just took them to the NBA Finals, and really he's the reason that they got that far, to ship him off in a trade that doesn't. I mean, obviously the Lakers are trying to find their guy of the future post LeBron, but as we were talking about before the show started, now they have no center at all, so they're not really a complete team by any means, and they've got a lot of players that are about 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", LeBron 6'8", like Reeves, Dalton Connect, Luka now, LeBron. It's some odd roster construction. I don't know. The NBA trades like that all the time that don't make sense, but that is one that, for once, everyone on the planet was like, what? This is wild. We all thought it was fake late, Saturday night when it happened. So that was a stunner for sure.
Yeah, everybody who's even a medium sports fan, if that's what you want to call it, tangential to sports, probably got a text that day that was like, oh my gosh, did you see this? It was otherworldly. But I do like now. I don't think I'm out of line in saying that LeBron, Luka, and Dalton are now the LeBron, Dwayne, Bosch trio. It's the new LeBron, Dwayne, and Bosch, right? Yeah. DK is definitely the third piece in that puzzle. What a time to be alive. So watch out for the Lakers. Although I do have to say I love Dalton Connect and that he's having a pretty decent rookie season. The Grizzlies are a contender, and in the last few seasons, I haven't really had to worry about this because they have stunk out loud. But actually, I'd like to see the Grizzlies with John Morant. Come on.
Yeah, Ja's actually on the court,
something.
not suspended, not hurt. He's
Yes.
as fun as anyone to watch. Speaking of athleticism and jumping ability, that guy
unreal
blocked a shot against the Hornets a couple weeks ago where he left the floor when the ball. It was just, you have to go look it up. You can't really do it justice.
I know.
It's
I know the exact play that you are talking about, for sure. But let's get into the actual, main part of the show, talking about Mike Eckler. And we'll do it right after I tell you about the good folks at Zen Sports. They have been doing another giveaway over there at Zen Sports. Tennessee exclusive grand prize winner was named for the January sweepstakes, and now Zen Sports is keeping that momentum up with the VIP Players Courtside Club sweepstakes for February. This month, one grand prize winner will win 2 VIP tickets to the Men's Basketball Conference Championship game in Nashville, a $10,000 bonus bet on any tournament game, or a $10,000 cash alternative. You will earn entries on every bet you place in February, and every dollar you wager. Plus, you'll earn 10 times the entries on all parlay bets. Do not miss out on this. And if you're not the grand prize winner, no sweat. You'll also have a shot at 10 small prizes, which grant you 2 tickets to any men's regional basketball tournament game and a $1,000 bonus bet on the tournament, or a $250 cash prize. But that is not all. All new customers who sign up with code A to ZTN, A to ZTN will receive 500 bonus entries. Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for a full list of rules, and you will earn a $100 no danger first wager on your first bet. Zen Sports betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Must be 21 or older and located in Tennessee. $5 minimum wager to qualify for entry. Terms and conditions apply. Full contest rules at zensports.com/sweepstakes. No danger first wager limited, plus 500 odds to qualify. A qualifying wager for a wager entry must have minimum odds for any leg of the entry of at least minus 250 American odds for clarity. A wager of minus 251 does not qualify. Zen Sports. Shout out to them. But as I said, we got to work on the length of their qualifiers at the end there.
It's a pretty good effort that you just gave, though.
Yes, and I did want to make sure I pulled over that read and didn't notice while quickly looking at it that it just had your promo code in it. It just said your promo code instead of A to Z Sports promo code, and I want to make sure that I know what it is. I'm pretty much certain it's A to ZTN, and I'm looking it up. Let's just go with A to ZTN for this week, and if it's wrong, we'll come back next week and try it again.
Hopefully no MLB umpires are on this app, because apparently that will get you fired, even for sharing.
No kidding.
Which is one of the wilder stories of the day.
It is actually crazy among all the other things that happened this week. But let's get to it. Mike Eckler, Tennessee special teams and outside linebackers coach, decides that he is going to leave for the same position at Nebraska. It's the same position minus linebackers at Nebraska. And this is an interesting move because it is definitely one where I always kind of hate that I have to say stuff like this, but I do genuinely believe it. I'm not going to lose sleep over losing your special teams coordinator. I think he did an admirable job. There have definitely been moments where I went and kind of said, "Hey, Mike, what are we doing out here?" It's had some ups and downs in his time, but overall, I think he did a fine job. And he was, as we were already mentioning, super electric personality, a great guy. It seemed like, and so it's kind of a shame to lose a character like him. But all things considered, it's it's not something where, like, if you had lost Tim Banks in the last few weeks, I would have been like, oh boy, you are starting from scratch on the defense now. This is going to be a whole deal. And now, I mean, just bringing in, and then that sometimes opens the door for other position coaches potentially leaving if their guys got, like, it can be a whole thing. Here, you heard this was potentially coming, and the rumblings, because he's from Nebraska originally. I think he worked at Nebraska in
The Bo Pelini
2009.
era.
Yeah, during the Bo Pelini years, during some of the best Bo Pelini years. I actually went back and looked, and so it was kind of a natural spot if they were to have him, and so it wasn't that surprising. It's not a position where I'm freaking out that you have to find somebody else. But I'll throw it to you, Zach. How are you feeling about this?
Yeah, I think you hate to lose his energy in the program. I think he did a good job with special teams. Special teams is tough. It's never going to be perfect. But as far as, there weren't a lot of punts returned on Tennessee. It seemed like the field position they were usually winning. You would have liked to seen some of Tennessee's returners field more punts and not give up so many yards on the back end there, where you're starting on the 7-yard line instead of maybe the 20 at times. But that could be on the player as well. I think Eckler went all in on coaching special teams. I'm not sure I don't know how involved he was. Obviously, he was involved with the outside linebackers, right? But with Rodney Gardner there in the defensive line and the way that works together, I think that was his show mostly. So I don't necessarily think you're losing anything, super elite on that end. That's not to throw shade at Eckler, but his biggest contribution was clearly on special teams. And I think that's something that you kind of got to be all in on. You're going to be the special teams coordinator, and some teams don't do a good job of giving that the proper attention. I thought Eckler and Tennessee really did. So you got to fill that void somehow. It's not something where you just like, hey, this guy coached special teams in 2010 somewhere. He's done it before. Let's throw him out there. I mean, you gotta be all in on wanting to do that job. So that to me is the biggest thing that Heupel has to figure out. I hate to see him go, but it's not a surprise. I mean, he's been a bit of a nomad throughout his career. In fact, I think if you look at his resume, he's at Tennessee for 4 seasons. He came when Heupel was hired. I think that's the longest stretch that he's been a coach anywhere throughout his career. I don't think he had been anywhere more than 3 seasons at any other point in his career. So one that says a lot, the fact that he stayed at Tennessee as long as he did. That just tells you the culture, the staff continuity, and how that all kind of vibes together. I saw a recruit recently, 2026 or 27 kid that Tennessee's recruiting. I can't remember his name, but he pointed out that like it felt like the staff at Tennessee was all in, all pulling in the same direction. Like they all had the same goals. It wasn't just people stopping, this is just a stop for them on their way to bigger and better things. I mean, for some of those guys, of course, that's probably the case, but they're kind of in the moment. They're focused on what they need to do to make Tennessee better. So and you have to have that to be a successful program. And Eckler was clearly bought into that. Can't blame him for wanting to get back home, closer to parents. Nebraska is a place that's important to him. So it felt inevitable. The only real holdup, it sounded like, was whether or not Matt Rule in Nebraska wanted Eckler, because those two had not crossed paths before at all. But I guess they were able to work it out and decided to bring Eckler back to Nebraska. And now Tennessee's got a position coach job to fill and a special teams coordinator and role to fill. And we'll see. Heupel doesn't get in a hurry in these types of situations. We've seen that before, where it could be a month, before they make some sort of formal announcement. I mean, maybe he surprises us and we hear something tomorrow. You never know. But even if he's decided what he's going to do, it wouldn't be shocking to hear a month from now that he's made that decision instead of this week. In fact, like Willie Martinez, his contract expired at the end of January. I think that was the reason the timing with Eckler happened the way it did. His contract expired over the weekend. Waits till that's officially done to make the jump to Nebraska. That way, you're not crossing any contract lines there or anything. We've heard nothing on Martinez yet. Everything that's been reported, I think Austin Price said on, Ramon, Kayla, and Will, or maybe it was Brent Hubbs, one of those two last week, that they expect him back. Same for the strength coach, Kurt Schmidt, who's on an expiring deal, but who knows when all that gets announced. Like Heupel might wait a month from now and announce all of those deals, even though they're all, going to probably be sticking around at Tennessee. So we'll see here how it plays out.
It definitely does seem like Heupel, in the scope of all of college football, has one of the best coaching cultures as far as his staff goes. The way that they, you're not getting guys just revolving door coming in and out. And it seems like guys really stick with him for a long time. It seems like he encourages more work-life balance than other coaches, because you just hear so much in this profession that just go out, you never see anybody but the other people on the staff. You might as well not even have a family. Like, don't bother, because you're not going to see them, and you're just on the road constantly. And I would bet that to whatever extent, Heupel expects these guys to get their job done, no doubt about that. But that I think there is a little bit more family-friendly atmosphere with Heupel, it seems like, and that's great. At the same time, I think it's created some criticisms that we've had where he only goes with internal hires a lot of the time, and some of his hires have been pretty uninspiring because he's a real, like, reward your friends and family sort of guy. It seems like if you work with him for a long time, he's gonna move you on up, like with Joey Halsley, who I think in a general sense we've kind of been unimpressed with. So that's great, but where does it leave us when you have this vacancy like this? And if, as you're kind of touching on there, if we see any more, I think this will probably be the only one we end up seeing, to your point there. And unless these guys want to leave, I don't think he's going to boot them out the door. But Billy Bob asks, any word on who may fill the position? So to that whole point there, and actually it's Kyle touches on it here. He says, I've been hearing a lot of people saying Coach Chop. That would be Levorn Harbin, who also colloquially known as Coach Chop. That is, if I had to bet on the situation, I think that's who ends up getting the job, because he has been supposedly behind the scenes an extremely strong recruiter for Tennessee, which that factor, I'm if it's true, I'm in a huge favor of getting guys like that promoted on this staff, because in today's, this has always kind of been true. It's all about recruiting, getting guys in the door. And he apparently works pretty closely with Rodney Garner, and he's what's his actual title? Defensive analyst, I think
it's senior defensive analyst.
Defensive analyst. Yeah. There you go.
And I think his paycheck reflects that as well. Like, he's a well-paid analyst.
Yeah, I mean those guys, depending on how you're considered in that hierarchy, I mean, it can be a solid, like, six-figure job just being an analyst. I don't know exactly what he makes, but I would bet it's somewhere in there. And so he's sort of just set up to, as it's felt like he's a guy where if a promotion comes up, he's that dude. And he's highly considered or highly regarded on the staff. And I think it's a natural move to just go, hey, we got a good guy right here. And this is one I have been critical of Heupel's internal hires in the past, like I already brought up with Joey Halsley. But this one, I'm pretty much in favor of. In fact, I think if he is a really, really strong recruiter, I don't want to say for certain that you're going to upgrade, because Eckler was, he was a fine special teams coach. But I think at least on the recruiting trail, you may be upgrading. If it ends up being Chop, we'll see soon enough. But I feel like that's where it's leaning now.
Yeah, honestly, I think I would be surprised if it's not. Like, if he goes in any other direction, I would be a bit surprised, because, Coach Chop, he's stuck around, right? I mean, he could have had opportunities to leave because he is so well thought of. Recruits love him. He'd been out on the road recruiting, over since the Ohio State game, I guess, December and into January, when they've been able to be out. He'd been out. Eckler had not been out as much. So that alone shows you how important they feel like he is to the recruiting efforts. They've paid him well. He's stuck around and waited his turn, kind of waiting on a situation to come up where I'm sure Heupel said, like, as soon as there's an opening, as long as it's not like a secondary coach, it's going to be you. So it just seems like the easy move to make. I do think, though, it creates some questions on the special teams coordinator role. I don't think that's – I touched on it already. I just don't think that's something you can gloss over. You've got to have somebody that really wants to do that job. And Coach Choppy, it's not like he's going to be coaching alongside Rodney Gardner in this new role where they're both, coaching. Maybe they will be to some extent because it's outside linebackers, but you're going to have, different responsibilities there. How do you split that up? And then where does that special teams coordinator role fall? Do you want that to be Coach Chop? Yeah, I don't know. I know he did it a long time ago, like at Georgia Southern, maybe a year or two he had done it. That's a much smaller level, a long time ago, different head coach, depending on what they want. You never really know what the role entails. You might see that on their resume, but you just never know, right? Like Nick Sheridan was the de facto quarterbacks coach at Tennessee when he was a graduate assistant when Mike DeBoard was the offensive coordinator. But he had the quarterbacks coach title, right? Like you never know how those responsibilities are actually split up. William Inge, I think, has the most recent experience of anyone on the staff. He did it at Indiana a couple of years, 2018 and 2019 maybe. But coaching linebackers, basically inside linebackers, that's a pretty important job. And there's definitely some areas where that position unit needs to grow moving forward that we saw at times this past season. Do you want to take him away from that and put him, geared towards special teams as well? Split those duties up and maybe put more responsibility on an analyst to coach linebackers? I don't know. I mean, that's a decision Heupel's going to have to make. And really, without knowing the dynamic of that group, you really don't know what direction he'll go there.
Yeah, it's definitely a position where if it's coached poorly, you're gonna notice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a detail-oriented thing because it's things like I think this was a Butch Jones term, hidden yards.
Yeah.
Am I right? I think that was a Butch thing.
He's right, and Butch was a pretty. That was probably the best part of his team was the special teams, and I remember seeing it at practices that you went to sometimes early in the Butch era. You got to see a lot more special team stuff than anything else, and he really, had a heavy hand in it. I remember it early on, him screaming at Jalen Hurd during some special teams reps because Jalen Hurd, I think it might have been his true freshman year, he just wasn't putting the effort in, I guess, that Butch wanted. And I remember him screaming, he was like, "Hey, Jalen, like every player at Alabama starts out doing special teams as a true freshman. Like you've got to do it. I mean, that's part of the deal. You go to the NFL, you might not be RB1. You might be getting on the field with special teams reps. So it's a pretty important deal that you really have to embrace. And like you said, if you don't, it shows up quick.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Jalen didn't have his eyes on the thighs or whatever. That other stuff that Butch used to say. But yeah, if you got guys out there that aren't like a big one, aren't fielding punts when they should be, I feel like that happened some with Eckler.
Yeah,
where I went, what are we doing? You're giving up 20 yards on a bounce off a punt when you should be catching it. And I know it's, some guys get back there and they get a little antsy. Oh, I'm going to muff the punt or whatever. Like it's a high pressure situation. But, sometimes, I mean, if it's late in a game and you either catch the ball in that tough spot or the ball bounces an additional 20 yards when you need a touchdown, 20 yards is 2 first downs.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal. And, that it pops up, and especially if you got guys that are fumbling, punts, kickoffs, whatever, like that's obviously super massive.
That was a huge play in Tennessee's win against Alabama in 22 was them fumbling a punt.
Yes. And it against what could have been, thankfully, Tennessee played well enough that this wasn't a factor. But the beginning of the Vandy game this year, you give up the punt or the kick coverage is bad. You give up a kick return when you're already on your heels, like. Or was that their very first score? I can't forget.
That was the first one, I think. Yeah.
Was it okay.
Sampson. Yeah. It was really just one player.
Yeah, that's right.
Assignment.
Sampson. Yeah. Sampson fumbled after that. That was the next thing that happened. Yes. It was bad. Yeah. But it does show up. So you want a guy that's going to do it well. But I like if it does end up being Harbin and And they do just make the typical Heupel, hey, here's our guy, he's already in the building. Heupel is not one to go out and hire a search firm for his for his hires. That's not really
Now, what
his
Darrell
way.
Sims is one of the only ones that he's kind of went outside.
Yeah,
Since he was first hired that first year, your running backs coach was really the only guy that he's went and Inge that he's went outside
that's true.
of his current analyst setup and made a hire. Maybe somebody on the offensive side of the ball takes special teams. I don't know. Maybe Alec Ablin, Darrell Sims.
Yeah, maybe it makes
I mean,
sense.
we'll just have to see. But it is important. Like I said, I think it's really easy to say, hey, this guy can do it, but there's a lot that's got to be done day to day. There's a lot of day to day responsibility with that. A lot of work you've got to get done, and you just can't halfway do it. You got to be all in on that stuff. And then, like I said, that was the one thing I think Eckler was good at, was because you had Rodney Garner there to kind of take care of the defensive line responsibilities. He was able to put more energy into the special team stuff.
Ablin or Sims could make sense, but then you turn around and then you have their position as a vacancy. So you don't totally solve your problem there.
Probably be the easiest to maybe handle, and that's not. I mean, I've always kind of heard that's the easiest position to coach at times is running backs, and it's important. Pass protection. I mean, that's going to be super important. Because you got a whole brand new cast of characters that you're going to be given very important reps to, and Peyton Lewis, Deshaun Bishop, they're young guys that they're really going to have to do well in pass protection. Then you've got a player coming over from Duke that's a whole new system. I'm sure he was able to pass protect pretty well at Duke, and those skills will translate and should translate, but it's still a new offensive system that he's learning. So it's not like you can just totally just pawn that off on a graduate assistant, but maybe that's the one position where you can step away from that and focus on special teams some.
I do like this. Ben Hall says, honestly, I don't think losing Eckler is news. You just need a special teams coordinator who's never worked for the Titans, and you'll be fine.
That was as bad as you will see at the professional level this last season.
Yeah, that's a good one, Ben. And Kyle brings up, he said, what about Ohio State losing both of their coordinators and their O-line coach? I was surprised that not Brian Kelly, Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly hopped out of there for the Raiders, right?
Yeah, they were called Pete Carroll.
Yes, really interesting move.
Really, no quarterback
national title. Yeah, it's that's odd to me.
Yeah,
but
look, Chip Kelly was huge for Ohio State this season, and I wrote about this. I don't know if we've really talked about it that much or not, but I wrote about this a couple weeks ago. That the last 12 years since Jimbo Fisher in 2013 was the last head coach that called offensive plays to win a national championship. Ryan Day got over that hump this year. This was the first year he'd given up play calling duties. And he said it was just too much. There's just too much to being a head coach that you have to look after every single day to game plan and call plays at the same time. And I know Tennessee's offense is a little different. It's a little more on the fly. It's not a super complex playbook. It's more like kind of what the moment dictates, where the ball is on the field. But Golesh has said, like Alex Golesh, former Vols OC, was calling plays all the time. That was, part of me wonders if it's not so much that it's Joey Hosley, if it's the combination of Heupel and Hosley trying to call plays, because Chris Lowe reported going into last season that Heupel was going to remain the primary play caller. Is it just too much for the head coach to do, especially as fast as that offense is trying to run? The offense hasn't run as fast since Golesh left. There's a lot there to unpack. Whereas with Ryan Day now, you lose Chip Kelly, a guy you trust. Who do you hire? Because everybody wants them to promote Brian Hartline, their stud wide receivers coach, right? Like, you can't let that guy go. He's an excellent recruiter. He's never called plays. I don't think Ryan Day's
right back where you were.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance. And everybody's, he could probably do it. And I'm like, well, maybe he can, but he's not Chip Kelly, who's done it for almost 2 decades or so. I don't think Ryan Day's going to trust Brian Hartline to call plays next season. No way.
Where has that truly worked? Where a coach is also the play caller on either side of the ball, where it just genuinely, they did an amazing job doing both. Just so often you hear it as a problem.
I know we give Eli Drinkwitz a hard time at Missouri, but the same is true of him. He was averaging 5-6 wins his first 3 seasons. His first 11-win season in 23 was the first year he gave up play calling duties.
Yep.
And they got a long way to go, but they don't have the talent and stuff. I mean, that's whatever you think of them is what you think of them, but the results don't lie. Like they improved significantly once he gave up play calling duties as the head coach.
Yeah. I think there's a real conversation to be had there with the way that Heupel is doing his whole deal, but I mean, it also sort of is what it is, frankly. Like he is a guy who has created the culture that he's created. He has potentially, to a fault, created a little bit of a culture where he's got yes men around him and dudes that will do his bidding for him, and that's worked to some extents, and in other ways, I think it hasn't. And so
it's tough because you want. I mean, I think Golish was just the perfect. I mean, maybe Golish was his Cutcliffe. I mean, that's kind of how it feels in a way because he was an outside hire. He was only with him 1 year at UCF. He had came from Iowa State. He had his own kind of dynamic personality, and we've talked to players about the way he approached things and did things, and it meshed perfect. Heupel trusted him, and I don't think Golish was afraid to speak his mind. It's like if you're the OC and the head coach doesn't want to do it, okay, we'll do it your way, but you can't be afraid to throw ideas out there. And Hasley is like Heupel's right-hand man and has been. He has not seen anything but what he's seen with Josh Heupel, dating back to his time as a player at Oklahoma. He's an extension of Heupel, and that's not to overly criticize him because I don't know what he's fully capable of because I don't think we've seen him kind of unleashed and been able to be his own person, but it's almost like when Heupel left Oklahoma, got fired, he kind of had to recreate himself, and he was able to kind of be his own coach. Some of that's probably true with Hasley to an extent because he's just been in Heupel's shadow this long. It's the only way he knows how to run an offense. So how many fresh ideas are you getting from Joey Hasley? It almost seems like it's probably a little bit of an echo chamber there.
Definitely. But like I said, it kind of is what it is at this point. I think you're not seeing a change there this offseason, that's for sure. No. So it's almost beside the point even talking about that. But before we do get to basketball, this is one more interesting comment here. Have you heard about Miami offering Smith from Ohio State $15 million a year and a condo? I have not heard about that. But
he's the one guy that I mean, that's insane money. Let's just be fair.
I said 10. Player. I said 10. That was my guess on Smith after that
because,
season.
Jeremiah Smith's not going to win Miami a national championship.
No.
Especially with Cam.
You got to have way more.
I mean, Carson Beck is who he is. I mean, he'll be a capable quarterback in the ACC, but
you probably win the ACC and make the playoff.
Ohio State won the championship because they had Jeremiah Smith and they had Carnell Tate and Will Howard playing at a high level, and Ibuka and Caleb Downs, and they had a whole cast of characters there.
$15 million for 2 years, he says.
Yeah, so that's still pretty. I mean, that's $7.5 a year. I mean, that's plus a condo in Miami. I'm sure is,
Yeah, and I mean to that point about Ohio State and Chip Kelly and everything, I was gonna say, I still feel like days are numbered. Like if just the way that this season went, obviously you still haven't beat Michigan, and that's a cloud that's going to be hanging over even this coming year. Everybody's going to be like, well, you won a national championship, but you still can't beat Michigan. Here's the Michigan game. Oh my God. And, there's still that. And, you have the Gene Chiswicks of the world. Like, he won a national championship and then got fired a year later, 2 years later. Like, it happens.
This season did have some like 2019 LSU vibes for Ohio State.
Yeah.
Not the whole season because they lost to Oregon, they lost to Michigan, but you had most of the best players, and then your quarterback who I like Will Howard. I like the way he plays. I didn't watch a ton of him at Kansas State, so it's not going to have this crazy opinion on him, but I liked what I saw in the playoff, right? He made some big time throws.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty competitive guy, seemed like a really good leader. He was the perfect quarterback to make that run for Ohio State. He bought into the disrespect and all that stuff, and he really thrived. You had that, and like I said, all these really, really good players, some good coordinators with Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles who are now gone. I don't think Ohio State's going to suddenly go 7-5 next year, but 10-2, 9-3.
Yeah,
I think that's on the table.
definitely. Yeah, definitely not out of the question. Yeah, Will Howard. It kind of reminds me of like Kirby Connell, Aaron Combs with Tennessee's baseball team, where you went. These aren't the best dudes in the sport, but they're perfect for their position that they're in.
Yeah.
Like Will Howard was plenty good enough to get the ball to those guys. And then when it mattered, like an Aaron Combs, truly when it mattered, that dude made that play for you.
Yep.
And so that's just sometimes that's the way those things work out.
Yeah.
And hey, good for them, because we knew the feeling from baseball. It's really nice when that happens. But
gotta have those guys.
Yeah, you really do. Anything else with football before we move on to the craziness on the basketball court over the weekend?
No, I guess the only thing, signing day coming up this week, Onus Conan Bobby, David, however you say his name, that's still committed to Tennessee. Technically committed to Tennessee, seems almost inevitable. He's flipping to Florida. Yeah, we'll see. You don't want to lose talented guys like LaJonza Hayward is one that flipped to Florida that in October said, I'm locked in with Tennessee. And that guy ended up being, I think On3 had him ranked as like the number 35 overall player in the class. I mean, he's almost a 5-star by their standards. That's one I think we're going to look back in a couple of years maybe and be like, oh, that was a rough one to lose. But who knows what went on there? I mean, it sounds like Tennessee, he visited for the Florida game. Tennessee beat Florida. They beat Florida in front of him. I don't know if it's NIL. And everybody's got to have a limit. And it seems like Florida is throwing out some crazy money after Napier went on that run there, kind of with Ladway a little bit there at the end of the season. Everybody's got a limit, and maybe that's what happened. They wrote a big check, but that's a tough one, I think, to lose.
I would guess it's NIL mixed with the potential you saw out of Ladway, where for the first time, I think in Napier's entire tenure, he had something to point out to go like, look, we might not suck. Yeah. Look, it might not be that bad next year. We got this dude. So I think it could be both of those things. But those are a couple of tough ones. Because I think you're right. I think he's the other kid's going to Florida too. But no need to dwell.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? Pruitt said you just worry about the ones you get, not the ones you don't get.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Hey.
Coach, that guy and stop complaining.
He didn't have many quotes, but that was one of them. Okay, so there it is with football. We'll obviously we'll talk about the replacement for Mike Eckler when that news drops. But moving to basketball, Tennessee's basketball team had two of its best players out with number 5 Florida coming into town. And I'll say with Florida, they are number 5. But this season in college basketball has so much parity that it almost feels like number 5 could also be number 15. And I think that definitely applies to Tennessee, and really it applies to almost everybody other than Duke and Auburn. And even Duke and Auburn is very, very good, but they almost got by Tennessee on their home floor. Like even they can have an off night. And so I don't want to sell Tennessee's win over Florida short, but I will say and I don't say this like to my own horn. I thought Tennessee could beat Florida in this spot. I did think we were probably going to lose in a, where it just, my feeling was coming into that game, it's going to be close at the end because it's in Thompson-Boling Arena. And then you just don't have the offensive playmaker to pull it out for you. And they do. They have an excellent backcourt, Florida. And one of those dudes got hurt in that game. That was a big piece of that. Even if he didn't get hurt, I think Tennessee still probably wins by a decent little margin. But one of their best dudes got hurt. And I felt like Tennessee could win, but they probably weren't going to. And they went in and won by literally 20. Just really played one of their best games. And the interesting conversation here to me is that having Ziegler out and Milicic too. To that extent, Milicic had the flu, and Ziegler's knee is funky. Not totally sure what's going on there quite yet.
He says he's playing the next game. So
okay, well, so assuming he's back. I mean, he played the entire second half of the game where he got injured, and maybe it's just we need to rest it so it's as strong as it can be. Whatever. But with them out, it made Tennessee get a little creative on offense, and I wonder if this taught not just the players, but the coaches more than anybody, the coaches some things about this team that I'm not sure they knew. Like maybe you can throw the ball into the post and get points because that hasn't been a thing all season. And they went and Felix Akbara got you points in the paint. I mean, back to the basket, turnaround shots, and nice technique and moves that he had. And there was, and Jordan Gainey running point looks natural out there. Looked really, really good. Some really interesting things happened in this game beyond just sort of the shocking factor of beating Florida by 20 with two of your best dudes out. I think this is a very encouraging game for more than just the win.
Yeah, I think it should end up being your biggest win of the season for so many different reasons. I was not nearly as confident as you. I thought they had no chance with Ziegler out, Milicic out, the way the last game went against Florida in Gainesville. Rough stretch, right? You lost several games there right on top of each other, several hard-fought games. Yeah. I wasn't very confident in it. And then shockingly, the way it went was, wow, did not see this coming type performance. But I think to your point, the win, to win that way without Ziegler and Milicic, just in a vacuum is huge, right? That's a great win for morale. But like you said, I think it maybe opens up some options for Rick Barnes that maybe he hadn't seen in action. It's like, hey, this can work, and this is different ways we can attack some of these teams. I also think that, the motivation factor was huge in it, and the team rallied around wanting to beat Florida. Jemai Mashach said after the game that the coaches had kind of showed them some stuff from Florida, some disrespect stuff, like the locker room videos with Florida after they beat Tennessee. So being able to use that, because I think part of that loss, like to Kentucky, was some of that. You were so drained coming off of an emotional game against Auburn, just a hard-fought game that you could have won. It just didn't go your way. Some of the best defense you'll see played all season. And then to show up, that game was on Saturday, then you played Tuesday, I think was the Kentucky game.
Yep.
So that's a short turnaround. You had a little bit more time. You had an extra day off in between this, Kentucky and Florida. Legs are a little fresher. You had that kind of that reason to go fight and to try to beat this team. They kind of made it a little bit personal. Whereas Kentucky, they played hard against Kentucky. Just the defensive effort wasn't quite the same as what we saw against Auburn and what we saw against Florida. I mean, holding them to 44 points. You do that. I mean, if you can do that every single time, if you can keep that same level of intensity up on defense, you can beat any team in the country. I mean, you almost beat Auburn at Auburn playing that type of defense. And it's just Auburn was playing the same type of defense. And like I've said, their length and their ability to clog up passing lanes really kept the offense from, taking advantage of some opportunities that they could have. But if you can bottle that up and deliver that every single night in March and April, I mean, you have a chance to beat anyone, no matter what your offense does. So if you are able to kind of turn over a new leaf here and find some new ways to attack these teams, I mean, yeah, that could end up being the biggest win of the year just because of what it does momentum-wise and what it shows you moving forward that maybe you need to do differently on offense. I do think, though, it could be a challenge. How do you work Ziegler into that? I think that's the part, though, that you got to figure out. And how do you manage that? I don't know.
Mr. Jones says, is Tennessee's offense less predictable when Gainey is a point guard? I think it's an interesting question, and I think it looked like it in that game against Florida. He looks very comfortable in that spot, and I think an interesting door that it opens is giving Ziegler more time on the bench during games. I mean, he is playing nearly every minute for you when he's fully healthy. And I I think there's
cuts down on some fouls too.
yes. And I think there's a real point to be made after you saw what happened in that game and the way that Jordan Gainey has just taken this massive step forward over last year. I mean, this dude was really good in that spot. Like genuinely, it's not just like, oh, for that game, he played well in Ziegler's stead. No, he looked like a really good point guard. Period. Case in point. And I think it could be interesting to slide Ziegler over to the 2. He likes taking shots, that's for sure. He needs to make them, but he likes taking shots.
It just takes away your ability to attack the basket. And Ziegler does a good job with that, but he's so
small.
Yeah, there's just plays that he can't make because of that. It's unfortunate because he's fearless and he goes and a lot of times he comes through.
He does.
Consistently doing that?
But Gainey giving you the additional height there, and I think he can facilitate, probably not as good as Ziegler. I mean, Ziegler is really wily when it comes to that stuff, and he's just Ziegler is extremely smart with the ball in his hands, especially, he'll get a guy on his hip, and he's really good at drawing fouls and stuff like that. The Gainey is probably not on that same level, but hey, you can give ZZ a breather now, so he can be fresh at the end of games. You can test him out at the 2, I think, after you watch that. You can there's definitely things that you can do here. And you look back, like I guess it was 2 years. 3 years ago? Was it 3 years? Ziegler's been here a really long time. I think it was 3 years ago. When he played with Kennedy Chandler. And Kennedy Chandler had the wherewithal to be a really good point guard, and they had to figure it out with him and Ziegler, and they did, and it worked really well. And I wonder if you could figure something out there that would, to Mr. Jones' point, maybe throw a wrench into the offense a little bit, give you some different options with Lanier, because when Lanier figures it out, he is lethal. Like that guy, and what you have to figure out is that he's not great at creating his own shot.
Yeah.
He can, but it's not his strength. But if you can have more cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, with the offense, and then possibly through that more easily get Lanier his shot, you might be on to something there. And then you add in Okpara being able to go back to the basket there and actually show some touch. It was nice. There's so much encouraging stuff in that game. I couldn't believe it, because that Kentucky game was one of the worst things I ever watched. That was just absolutely horrific. So it was, this is an exciting one, and I think it could be a little a blessing in the skies here.
So, if nothing else, it just gives you some options with, if the offense is stagnant, if you're running through a dry spell in a game where you can kind of flip into a different lineup and put Gainey in that spot, kind of like against Florida. It gives you it opens up another option where it's like, okay, this isn't working. We got nothing else that we can really go to. Here's a brand new combination that we know works, and throws defenses off, whatever. It's something else they have to prepare for. And to defend, it's not the typical Tennessee offense we've seen this season under Barnes. At the very least, I think it gives you that option.
It does, and you even saw Bishop Boswell come in and give you some really useful minutes. He was really good on defense, but then he showed some real intelligence on the offensive end. He didn't come in and light the world on fire, shooting the basketball. But I look at that play. Everybody replayed the sequence where Meshack stole the ball, passed it to Cade. He passed it to Boswell, back to Cade. Cade slammed the basketball. It was a really just beautiful sequence of basketball. And Boswell in that spot, he could have taken that pass from Cade Phillips and tried to go to the basket. He had the time where he could have tried for a layup, but he had a Florida player right behind him that could have made a play on the ball. And instead, he doesn't even get his feet on the ground. He just goes straight back and passes the ball back to Phillips. Unselfish play when he could have tried to score himself. And I liked what I saw out of pretty much everybody in that game. And you saw them with those alternative lineups work through offensive problems. I mean, they had those same stretches of bad offense where it wasn't working, and then they figured it out with Dubar on the floor and with all these other options that I think to make a deep run, your bench guys are gonna have to find production for you. And I think you saw some real indicators here that they can.
The the Lanier shot, every time Lanier shoots better when he's contested, there in the comments. The Lanier, like the in transition 3 from like the shoulder over there, feels like he does not miss that shot. Like every time,
It
I
is
feel like
his
that's
shot.
I'm at the point where it's like that's going in. Because first few times it's like, yeah, it's kind of a deep shot he's taking, but he's money there. It doesn't matter if somebody's on him or not.
Yes.
That seems to be his shot.
And I just love when they do get transition plays like that, because Barnes, that's not Barnes' game. That's not what Barnes likes to see his guys play. He's more of a half-court offense coach. He's not a Bruce Pearl or a Nate Oates, but I love when they get Lanier that open shot. I feel exactly like you do. You go, oh, here we go, and a lot of times it goes in, and so like exciting stuff for Barnes' basketball team, because that Kentucky game was really disheartening to watch, because I mean, you beat Kentucky in every meaningful statistical category except for shooting percentage. And it was enough of a difference in Kentucky's favor. You shot, if I'm thinking correctly, it was 22 more shots than Kentucky. And friggin' half of those were Ziegler chucking up threes, which I think the absence of that probably helped in the next game.
Yeah.
At the very least, it made Florida have to defend in kind of a different way. But
yeah, Tennessee just played into what Kentucky wanted them to do, and then did not make them pay for it.
No, they played Kentucky's game, which on some nights they can do. When Lanier is going out and scoring 30 points, yeah, you can do that. If I think I did some sort of math, and it was like if Tennessee had shot 30% from the floor, I think they shot like 24 or something like that. Maybe it was 35% from the floor. Like not amazing, but like an average night, they would have won by like 10. Like it's Kentucky. Like it was that tenuous.
Yeah.
Because they won on the boards. I think it was the same amount of assists for both teams. You won in the steals and turnover battle. You had like 15 points off of turnovers. I think they had like 3 points off turnovers. Like every piece was in your favor except for that one. And they walked in, and I think a team that's not as good as yours beat you that night. And that's on your home floor. It's friggin' terrible. And the way that they responded here is really, really great.
Well, ultimately, Kentucky had to pay for that win with what happened this weekend.
Yes, they did.
I bet they would almost. Kentucky loves beating Tennessee, but I think they would probably flip in a second and switch how the game against Arkansas went, how the game against Tennessee went. Oh my gosh,
Arkansas with John Cal, that Arkansas team is terrible.
Yeah,
I mean they lost to LSU. And LSU, it's either LSU or South Carolina. One of those two is the worst team in this league. It's probably LSU. And I think that game was in Fayetteville. I mean, they're really bad. Like, just not a good football team. They got transfers.
They're not your basketball team either.
Yeah. So, did I say football team?
Yes.
Sorry. They are not a good football team, although they beat Tennessee this year. And they're not a good basketball team, and they did not beat Tennessee this year. Tennessee waxed these dudes. Like easily just beat the tar out of Arkansas a few weeks ago. And they went into Rupp in Calipari's return in what should have been. I mean, that Kentucky team is pretty dang good. And didn't just lose, lost by double digits. And I think it was borderline wire to wire. They were down almost the entire game. I'm not sure if Kentucky led, because a big chunk of it I didn't watch. I watched the end of it. But I mean, just absolutely terrible. And then the funniest part of the entire thing outside of that, because Tennessee fans can really sympathize. I mean, Bruce Pearl got fired by Tennessee, and has gone to Auburn. He has the number one basketball team in America right now. Like, hey, we've been there. And you just lost to Bruce. You beat him last year, but you just lost him a couple weeks ago. We know that feeling. But the Kentucky players cheering for Arkansas, the former Kentucky players that played for Calipari cheering for Arkansas, I would lose my mind if Tennessee fans did that. Like, those dudes are grown adults that can make decisions for themselves, and I know that they love that coach. But the one that is off the map, like, I cannot believe it was Reed Shepherd. The kid, I mean, am I wrong? I don't know his full history there, and I frankly don't really care. But I believe, wasn't his dad like on a national championship Kentucky basketball team? I think.
Maybe. I feel like his mom may have had a connection as well. I can't.
Yes, I think. And I mean, just a true legacy. And he went to his G League game or NBA, whatever, wherever he's playing now, and he wore an Arkansas shirt before that game. And I like, imagine if, who would it be? Grant Williams goes to a game wearing a Kentucky shirt. Well, it would be an Auburn shirt. I mean, what if we wore an Auburn shirt before the Auburn game? Are you kidding me? Except that's not. I guess he didn't play for Bruce Pearl. Who would it be? Chris Lofton. Like if Chris Lofton went before whatever game wearing an Auburn shirt because he played for Bruce Pearl, like Tennessee fans would be like beside themselves, and Kentucky fans were. I mean, freaking out. But that and other players were tweeting. Like I sent one to you where I don't remember exactly who it was. One of Ty Washington or one of those guys in the last few years, and he tweeted, "Walk into your trap and take over your trap, buddy. That was your trap. You played there." Like, what are you talking about? That's so crazy. I don't know.
That feels like something that would happen to Tennessee, honestly.
It does, doesn't it?
Things have been going so bad in Knoxville, but it's that night when it's bad. I'm sure. I mean, Kentucky fans woke up. We're gonna blow this guy out of the gym, right? Kentucky's gonna beat Arkansas by 20 or 30 points. To me, this is great. Like, haha, told you we're in a better spot now, and all this stuff. And that game, from the way the game played out to the reaction, went probably went worse than anybody in Kentucky could have imagined. To lose like that, and then to have all those players, supporting Calipari, that is wild. And it really just shows you, though, and Kentucky fans will never admit it or accept it, maybe, but clearly playing college basketball in Kentucky is not the family lifelong connection that it is at some of these other schools or in some of these other sports. I mean, Tennessee football, for example, there's not really a comparable situation. We were talking before the show, maybe like when Lane left because he was popular with coaches. It's just there weren't a lot of great players on that team. But like if Montario Hardesty, went to a Tennessee versus Ole Miss game, and he was wearing an Ole Miss shirt, or they're talking junk about Ole Miss beating Tennessee and Neyland, back in like 2021, or really any player that played for Kiffin, like that they'd be ostracized from the Tennessee alumni network or whatever. I mean, they would be hated in East Tennessee for the rest of their lives, just for that one thing. I mean, that would be absurd.
Other former players would be ragging those dudes.
Yeah.
Like I've interacted with a lot of former Tennessee players in my time doing media stuff, and none of those guys would stand for that.
Like Jonathan Crompton, for example, I mean, who you do the game day show with, played for Lane Kiffin. I know you did a game day show with him in 21 when they played Ole Miss. I can't imagine that there was. I mean, he's a Kiffin guy, right? Like, he likes Kiffin.
Yeah,
there was not a single ounce of him. Not a single ounce of him that wanted Ole Miss to win that night. Not one bit.
Yeah, it's so crazy, and it really truly showed how vapid all of that stuff was with Calipari, because Kentucky fans complained about that. To Kentucky fans' credit, they complained about that when Calipari was there, where they were just like, oh, well, we're just an NBA factory. We're not a championship winning program. We're an NBA factory. They won that one championship with Anthony Davis, one of the great generational players you'll ever see. And that was awesome. But Calipari has never been a great floor coach. And he's always been one of the best recruiters ever in college basketball. And that's been about it. And they showed up for Calipari and they showed up for a paycheck. And there you go. But the Reed Shepherd one still, that one could not make less sense to me. Like to me, if like my own father didn't go to Tennessee, but he's no Kentucky fan or anything. I mean, we just moved here when I was a very young child, but like it's not like I just came pre-programmed as a Tennessee fan or whatever. It came from living here, and I would take my own skin off my body before wearing a Kentucky shirt. Like it seems trivial when you think about like the grand scope of life, but it is like what Reed Shepherd means. He had like a good, meaningful year at Kentucky. He's a legacy player with a dad who's, I think I even saw somebody tweet, he played with Mark Pope. His dad played with Mark Pope, I think. And he goes out and does, like, I would feel so betrayed if I was Pope, I guess.
Yeah,
like,
Pope
I'd be calling up his dad being like, what's your kid doing?
Pope makes it even more interesting just because he is a Kentucky guy. It's even more of a slap in the face to Kentucky's program. It's not like you hired some random guy that, that had no connection to Kentucky or wasn't familiar with Kentucky fans at all. That definitely adds another element to it that I didn't really think about. But that's just, what a terrible night for Kentucky fans. Great day for Tennessee. You beat Florida. You get to see Kentucky fans go through that entire meltdown and then, have the players react the way they did.
His father was teammates with Mark Pope, and both parents played basketball at Kentucky. Jeff and Stacy Shepherd, and his dad was the MVP on their 1998 national championship team.
Oh wow,
that is crazy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's even different than like a Jamal Murray coming down from Canada to play at Kentucky before he goes to the NBA. I mean, this is a lifelong Kentucky guy, born and bred type deal.
Yeah, that does not shock me. Like if it was Ty Washington or whoever tweeted that thing that I said, that doesn't shock me. It's funny. It's pretty hilarious as an outside observer.
That is the funniest tweet, though. Really, just it's like it is your trap. Yes,
it's like, buddy, you played there. That was your home court. Yeah, like that one doesn't shock me. But yeah, that one is not. I mean, I don't think Tennessee like has an equivalent to that. If it would have been if Allen Houston, after his dad left Tennessee, Allen Houston win and whatever. There's not an equivalent.
I don't know. Are you going when I don't know the Titans' schedule this year, but if they play the Patriots, which it's possible they're both in the AFC, you're gonna wear like a Mike Vrabel Patriot jersey mixed with like a Will Levis Titans jersey or whatever you're.
Yep, I got that loaded up.
Yeah.
I've been getting that made this offseason. Yep. No, I will not be as much as I love both of those guys so much. They're two of my favorite people in all of sports. I definitely don't hate them both. Yeah. No, I will not be doing that. It's like
somebody buy a custom one, send it to Charlie. Please.
Honestly, that would be funny. I maybe would post a picture of it on Twitter. That's the best I can offer you, but I think that's it. We're going along. That's the show. Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan. Thanks to everybody for hanging out. Tons of comments tonight. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for tuning in. We could not do it without you, as I always say. Zach, anything on the way out the door?
That should do it. We'll see what happens with this special teams coordinator job. Though, like I said, could be weeks before we hear anything just because of the way Josh Heupel does things.
Yeah, I'm not expecting anything in too short order, but we'll talk about it when it does happen. Thanks again to everybody for watching. Yeah, that's it. All right. We will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.